All right, as we wrap up our week at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, I'm Jim Sharpe, and this is a special edition of the AZ Political Podcast. My boss said I should just give you my top 10 takeaways from the DNC. So let's do that. Number one, the positivity. There was a lot of positivity here. I don't know how much of it was fueled by, thank God we've got a nominee that's under the age of 80. But there was a lot of positivity, and it felt like people coalesced behind Kamala Harris in a very quick and very enthusiastic fashion. Number two, change in the wording, the language that Democrats use. The messaging was freedom. It was patriotism. And they didn't feel like they were stealing these words from the Republicans. They feel like they've kind of always been there. But I got to tell you, honestly, I never thought I'd hear a USA, USA chant at a Democratic convention. Other than USA sucks, because that's kind of the perspective from a lot of people looking in at the Democratic Party for a lot of years. Number three would be the lack of change in Democratic policies. Still a lot of big government spending, still a lot of freebies. Kamala Harris talks about, wanting to make sure that people can get a down payment for their house. Of course, that would come from the government. So there's still a lot of big government thought in Democratic policies. Number four, the availability of Democrats. I'm talking about Arizona Democrats. They were available. We actually got an interview with not Kamala Harris, but with Governor Katie Hobbs, which doesn't seem like usually ever happens in Arizona. So I'm wondering if we can actually set it up so we have a mini Democratic convention in Arizona every week. Number five is Kamala Harris's lack of availability to the press. She has not held a real interview since she became the nominee or the designated nominee before the actual vote was taken. She needs to spend some time one-on-one with, it could be a friendly journalist, but some journalist of some type. Number six of our top 10 takeaways from the DNC in Chicago would be the history. This was historic. Seeing a woman of color added to a major party's ticket. I know that's not why we're supposed to vote for her, and the Democrats here would tell you the same thing, but listen, that is still an absolutely amazing sign of how far America has come, that we have a woman of color at the top of a major party's ticket. Number seven, inclusivity at the DNC. And I don't mean that from a perspective of being welcoming to people of all races and backgrounds and religions and sexual orientations. I mean, in practicality. I mean, politically, at a time when Republicans are telling people who don't pass a certain Trump litmus test, don't vote for us and don't be a Republican, the Democrats are creating a very big tent. Number eight of our top 10 takeaways from the DNC. Got to put it in here. The great city of Chicago. This is my first time really ever spending any time in Chicago. And the people are amazing. The history is amazing. The architecture, the culture. This is a great city. I understand completely why people are proud of being in or being from Chicago. Number nine, Chicago pizza. Yeah, the deep dish. That's for tourists, people. Tavern-style pizza is what's really Chicago pizza. And I learned this, by the way, from the late, great Johnny of Johnny's Pizza. It used to be on Cave Creek. Thin crust pizza, slightly sweet sauce. That's real Chicago pizza. And Danny Shapiro, who is our KTAR.FM web editor, and I actually had a Neapolitan pizza our first night here. And number 10, with all of that being said, my top 10 takeaway from the DNC is I can't wait to get back to Arizona, where, well, let's just be honest, half of Chicago lives anyway, right? There you go, our top 10 takeaways from the DNC in Chicago. Danny, come on over here for a second. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions as well. Am I wrong on the pizza thing?
You're not. I've had a lot of deep dish. We all have living in Arizona, Chicago-style deep dish. But no, that Neapolitan pizza we had was incredible. It is the way to go, and anyone who comes here, try that, please.
Absolutely. What do we tell people about the city of Philadelphia? since we sat next to some guy who was the loudest talk show host ever at this thing. Did we ever want to eat pizza in Philadelphia?
I think our view of cheesesteaks might have decreased a little bit after this week. It's typical Philly. At the end of the day, it's typical Philly. But yeah, it was an interesting experience on Media Row, having spent time at the RNC and now at the DNC. Definitely an interesting experience. But for us in Arizona, we remember what happened in the NLCS last year, playing Philadelphia. So yeah, believe me, it was an interesting experience to say the least.
And comparing the RNC and the DNC, what is your biggest takeaway in putting the Republicans up against the Democrats when it comes to putting on a convention?
The DNC was just more lively. It was in a bigger venue. There was more people. There was more star power in terms of celebrity. That was to be expected, of course. But also just the amount of Republicans who spoke at the DNC. You were not seeing that on the Republican side. I was at the RNC. There was not Democratic speakers every night, and they were not out in force like there was at the DNC with Republicans. Just the party alliances and where we are right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in November when you do have so many who are, in a way, defecting and supporting Kamala Harris on the Republican side. That was definitely a big difference. We were not seeing that in Milwaukee a month ago.
All right. Any other thoughts as we exit the city of Chicago, Danny?
Yeah, we're gonna go back and it's gonna be 110 again. And we're filming this right now, and it's maybe 75 degrees out. Probably closer to 70 right now. So that's going to be a change. But yeah, we're 75 days out from an election.
Wow.
We're going to head home tonight, and we might get stopped in traffic at the airport because Donald Trump's in town, and he's going to have to leave. And he was in Arizona yesterday. Just because the convention is ending here and the conventions are now over, Arizona is still going to be in the limelight for the next 2.5 months, and we'll see continued presidential candidates. We'll just see so much going on election-wise in our state over the next 2.5 months.
Boy, isn't that the truth? And I would expect Kamala Harris is going to be a part of that. She cannot avoid coming to Arizona. Absolutely important battleground state, as Donald Trump has shown, and as RFK Jr. has shown as he's exiting the race. So that's what's going on here in Chicago. That's what's been going on here in Chicago. Thanks for watching this special Chicago edition, special DNC edition of the AZ Political Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharpe. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.